Hello everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to have you here. Today, we'll be exploring the topic of cohort study design. The focus will be on understanding how these studies are structured and their importance in research. We'll briefly go over the key elements of designing a cohort study and discuss some practical examples. I look forward to sharing this information with you. Let's get started. A cohort study is a type of long-term observational research that tracks a specific group of people who share a common trait. By following these individuals over time, researchers can observe how certain exposures, like habits or environmental factors, may influence health outcomes or even mortality. Because it monitors people before they develop any illness, it's considered a gold standard method for figuring out what came first, whether the exposure caused the outcome, and for accurately estimating the risk of developing a condition. Now let's look at the core mechanics of how these studies work. First, at the baseline, all participants must be free of the outcome we're interested in, such as a disease. This way, we're starting with a clean slate, so to speak. Next, we divide the group into two, those who have been exposed to a specific factor and those who haven't. The goal here is to measure the incidence rate, which tells us how many new cases of the condition develop over time, and also to understand how the condition naturally progresses. This structure allows us to see the potential cause-and-effect relationship clearly, making cohort studies a powerful tool in epidemiology and public health research. Let's take a closer look at the core mechanics of study design. First, we have the baseline, which means that all participants need to be free of the outcome, such as a disease, at the start of the study. This helps us establish a clear starting point. Then, there's the split, dividing the group into those who are exposed to a specific factor and those who are not. This division is crucial because it allows us to compare how different exposures might influence outcomes. Our main goal here is to measure the incidence rate, which is essentially how many new cases of a condition appear over time, and to understand the natural progression of that condition. Now, when it comes to variations in study design, researchers often choose their approach based on budget and data availability. For example, prospective studies are forward-looking. They recruit participants now and follow them into the future. These studies tend to be the most accurate because you're observing events as they happen, but they are also the most costly and time-consuming. On the other hand, retrospective studies look backward, using past records, like old medical files, to identify exposures, and then moving to the present to see what resulted. These are faster and more cost-effective, but they may have limitations in data quality. Finally, there's the distinction between open and closed cohorts. A closed cohort has a fixed membership. No new participants join once the study starts. An open cohort, however, allows people to enter or leave at different times, which can reflect real-world situations more accurately. Connecting all of this back to our overall theme, understanding these core mechanics and design variations helps us choose the right approach for our research questions and resources, ultimately leading to more reliable and meaningful findings. Let's take a closer look at the strengths and weaknesses of this particular study design. First, one of the key strengths is the proven timeline. This approach clearly shows that the cause happens before the effect, which is crucial for establishing a potential cause-and-effect relationship. It helps us understand the sequence of events, making our findings more convincing. Another advantage is versatility. This method allows us to link one exposure to many different outcomes. So, if someone is exposed to a certain factor, we can observe multiple possible health effects, giving us a broader understanding of the potential impacts. However, there are some notable weaknesses to consider. For instance, when studying rare diseases, this approach can be quite inefficient. You'd need a massive group of participants to observe just a few cases, which can be resource-intensive and time-consuming. Attrition bias is another concern. Over time, participants may move away or quit the study, and losing these individuals can really skew the data. It undermines the reliability of our findings, especially in long-term studies. On the upside, this design is great for studying rare exposures. For example, If we want to investigate a specific factory chemical as a trigger, this approach allows us to focus on niche exposures that might otherwise be difficult to study. But on the downside, it also tends to be high cost. Prospective studies require a lot of funding and patience, sometimes taking decades to gather enough data to draw meaningful conclusions. So, understanding these strengths and weaknesses helps us decide when and how to use this approach effectively within our overall research strategy. A cohort study is incredibly versatile, making it a primary tool for researchers to understand how health and environmental factors influence populations over long periods. It allows us to follow a group of people over time and observe what happens to their health. One key application is tracking rare exposures. While cohort studies aren't the best for studying rare diseases, they excel at studying rare exposures. For example, if a small group of workers is exposed to a unique industrial chemical, we can follow that specific group, what we call a cohort, and compare their health outcomes over time to the general population. This helps us identify potential risks linked to that exposure. Another important aspect is calculating risk and frequency. Since these studies start with healthy individuals, they give us reliable data on how often new cases of a disease develop, what we call incidence rates. We can also determine the relative risk, which tells us how much more likely the exposed group is to get sick compared to those unexposed. Additionally, hazard ratios help us understand the timing or speed at which events, like a heart attack, might occur in different groups. Overall, cohort studies provide vital insights that help us understand long-term health trends and risks, making them essential for public health research. Now, let's explore how cohort studies help us establish cause and effect, focusing on temporality. This is often like the classic chicken or the egg problem. Did the habit lead to the disease, or did the disease influence the habit? Cohort studies address this by making sure the exposure happens before the health outcome. By following healthy individuals over time, researchers can clearly show that the factor they're studying came first, helping us determine causality more confidently. Next, we have mapping disease life cycles. Cohort studies enable scientists to observe the natural history of a condition, starting from the initial exposure, moving through early symptoms, and ultimately to recovery or, unfortunately, death. This process is known as prognostic research. It's incredibly useful because it allows doctors to predict a patient's likely future based on their current health profile, guiding more personalized care. Finally, these studies are key for evaluating long-term impact. They go beyond just identifying harmful factors. They also assess how effective interventions really are over time. For example, they can show how a new medication performs over 10 years, not just in the short term. They can track whether a citywide smoking ban actually reduces heart attack rates over the following decade. And they help us monitor the long-term durability of surgical procedures, like a specific type of hip replacement, ensuring that treatments stand the test of time. Overall, cohort studies are essential tools. They help us understand causality, map disease progression, and evaluate the true long-term impact of health interventions. All right, before we wrap up, I want to encourage you to take a few simple actions that can really help us grow this community. First, subscribe to the channel. This way, you'll stay updated with all our latest content and insights. Next, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button. It might seem small, but it makes a big difference in helping more people discover this material. Remember, engaging with the content like this helps us create more valuable resources for you and others. So don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for your support.